Reading a complex document is a computational act. It requires the brain to execute the active, algorithmic parsing of a data architecture. When confronted with dense, unfamiliar text, the human brain must perform two distinct types of cognitive processing simultaneously to extract meaning. The first requirement is universally recognized: domain knowledge. A reader must possess at least some baseline understanding of the vocabulary and subject matter at hand. The second requirement is often invisible to the reader: metatextual knowledge. This is a functional awareness of the physical and rhetorical shape of the discourse itself. Expository text lacks the predictable story grammar of narratives. There are no characters, plots, or expected resolutions. To process technical documents, readers have to map hidden rhetorical schemata to understand how and where to extract data. Expert comprehension depends on these two systems running in tandem. Without both the domain vocabulary and the metatextual map, the reader can identify individual words but will fail to parse the logical structure of the document. Domain knowledge is the reader's pre-existing understanding of the places, objects, events, and purposes described on the page. If you are reading a text analyzing the engineering scale of the Panama Canal or the political realities of 19th century Ireland, you need a pre-existing schematic of historical facts to anchor the new information. In a classic series of studies by researcher James Voss, individuals were tested on their ability to recall verbal accounts of a specific baseball game. Individuals with high initial knowledge of the sport demonstrated superior memory for the play-by-play. Because they already understood the rules of the domain, they could slot new verbal data into an elaborate pre-existing mental representation. Content area knowledge generally facilitates comprehension. However, it is not a fail-safe mechanism. Subject matter experts can still fail to parse information if the document they are reading is structurally dense and lacks clear cues. Possessing raw facts about a domain serves little purpose if the reader cannot navigate the structural vessel carrying the new information. Authors construct these vessels using rhetorical schemata. These are consistent communicative patterns used to systematically represent situations in discourse. When reading a narrative story, experienced readers expect to find a standard sequence of complications and resolutions. Expository documents abandon these familiar components entirely. To understand how expository text functions in their absence, we evaluate its architecture from the atomic level up, observing how contiguous sentences bind together. Researcher H.A. Stark mapped this local connectedness. By treating any two adjacent sentences as distinct nodes of data, she established a taxonomy of 6 specific relationships. In a contrastive relationship, the second sentence disagrees with the first. In a coordinate relationship, both sentences sit at the exact same level of generality. A subordinate relationship occurs when the second sentence drills down into concrete detail. A superordinate pairing zooms out to provide an abstract summary of the first. The final two pairings are causal, where the second segment provides a logical reason for the first, and evaluative, where it emphasizes or denies the previous statement. Stark's empirical analysis revealed that over 80 sentences in expert writing are not isolated propositions. They function as interconnected pairs, where each segment continuously defines the logical context of the next. These sentence-level microstructures rapidly aggregate into macrostructures, forming the global architecture of the text. Researchers Bonnie Meyer and Leonard Poon categorized these global macrostructures into 5 overarching blueprints. The description structure organizes specific attributes about a topic. The sequence structure organizes ideas strictly along chronological relations. Causation maps enabling or goal-related relationships, heavily utilized for procedural directions and natural processes. The problem and solution framework is driven by specific questions and targeted responses. The comparison layout balances distinct concepts to explicitly detail their contrast and alternative relationships. While simple listing or collection is common in texts, Meyer and Poon determined that listing operates as a subfeature nested inside these 5 primary architectures, rather than standing as a blueprint on its own. These 5 rhetorical macrostructures operate as the blueprints authors use to systematically upgrade a reader's prior domain knowledge. How does a reader actually detect these invisible Meyer and Stark frameworks while scanning a page of dense black text? They rely on text organizers, visual and verbal devices like paragraphing, headings, tables of contents, and bold styling. These organizers are standard features in coherent expository prose, serving as the baseline requirement for a document's readability. A chapter heading directly signals a shift in Meyer's macrostructure, pivoting the reader from a basic description framework into a problem-solution analysis. Indented bullet points physically manifest Stark's coordinate microstructures, confirming that a sequence of ideas sit at the exact same level of generality. Text organizers function as the exact cognitive user interface that allows the reader to interact with the author's underlying rhetorical schema. Researchers Meyer and Rice theorized that how a reader processes this interface dictates their level of comprehension. When facing complex documents, cognitive behavior splits sharply between novice and expert readers. Novices rely on a list strategy. They accumulate information in linear packages, reading sequentially without attempting to organize the data into meaningful relationships. This default state fails to establish local connectedness. It rapidly overloads working memory and fragments the text. Experts employ a structure strategy. They actively search for organizational plans to subsume large chunks of information into a summarized, coherent whole. Readers using the structure strategy actively search the document for patterns and authorial theses to bind all the incoming propositions together. Two readers with identical domain knowledge will walk away with vastly different comprehension outcomes based entirely on which of these two strategies they deploy. Expert comprehension inherently assumes the reader is aware of text organizer functions and knows precisely how to exploit them. For authors and instructional designers, leaving structural relationships implied is a failure of communication. By designing documents with precise macro and micro rhetorical signals, we provide the cognitive scaffolding required for a reader to successfully integrate complex information.